Coming up on Mount Hermeneutics, Brian's going to let you know if you're going to heaven or not. And Matt and I are going to try to affirm that. I mean, not exactly, but stick around. You'll see. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the Divine Council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck.
I can agree with a lot of what you're saying, with what both of you were saying. Like, I think we have a lot of common ground there, more than would be suggested by the contention here.
I agree.
I think that Matt hit it on the head. You're coming out of a defensive.
But
bro, I know 5 fat people, and Michael Moore's 4 of those 5.
You know what I'm saying?
And he ate the other one.
Yeah. Again, the movie director Michael Moore, not you, Dad.
Yeah.
It's one thing if they're eating a burger. It's another thing if they're eating gummy bears and white Gatorades.
Right. Yeah. Ooh. What's happening, fellas? What's going on?
Hey, Dre.
Just another week. Went to work. It's been raining, so there's roads all washed out because I live in Southern California, where
I just saw a thing that said you have like life-threatening floods, and you're in the yellow part of it where you're at.
Did we talk about the flood last week when
it was starting to flood?
The deluge
of
the Highway 78, which connects like Oceanside to Escondido. Like it goes through that whole basically from the 5 to the 15. That's where it connects. It was a river. There's leave it to Oceanside dudes rocking the paddleboard on the I-78. Just and there's cops like, get off the road. He's like,
They're like, make me. What are you gonna do?
So there's a bunch of meth addicts running around out there, insane.
Is that new?
Meth addicts?
Yeah.
No, it's been around.
Does the rain bring them out?
No, the freaks come out at night, and now all day here in Oceanside. It's wonderful.
Well, you're getting floods. We had an earthquake here.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. Wait a minute. So I'm getting floods and you're getting earthquakes?
Right.
What?
Right.
The world is upside down.
That's global warming.
Dogs are loving cats. I don't know.
I thought we were getting nuked at first, but
you don't know the beginnings of an earthquake. Fucking rookie.
It's funny you say that though, because I remember when I lived in SoCal, when I was in Mesa, Costa Mesa High, and we had a 4.0 something like that hit. And I remember as soon as it happened, everybody's like, whoa. And this one kid goes, was that real? And we're all like,
you should have been like, was what real?
We were like, no, this is Universal Studios. They brought their earthquake machine to test it on our school campus. Yes, that was real.
Yesterday, my oldest daughter, she threw a Galentine's Day. So all the girls get together for Valentine's Day, throw a little party
for themselves.
Yeah.
To take all the boys off the hook so they can all be conscientious objectors like me.
I guess so. I guess it's a thing. And then it's funny because Cooper came over. He's like, someone said there's something like a Palentine's Day, and I was like, Cooper, have you ever celebrate Palentine's Day? And I know I just fraudulently slipped gay, Palentine's gay, but yeah, I'll be like, son, why are you gay?
What are you gay?
I'm gay.
I was about to say, like, yeah, me and all my guy friends have a Brolentine's Day.
Yeah, it's called Saturday with the Lakers on, right?
That was just gonna
some
be
beer. Like that's every day for dudes. I don't know.
I was just gonna be kidding though. I wasn't gonna mean it.
Oh, so this will air after right at Valentine's Day, not this
very nice.
One before. Yeah, I've been a lifelong conscientious objector of Valentine's Day. And Carrie's known this since the beginning. I have zero patience. As the kids used to say, I can't even when it comes to Valentine's Day.
We're looking to go into a Sawyer Brown concert the following weekend. Just so it just depends.
If doing something is cool,
right? Yeah.
Right?
But I'm not trying to make a stupid reservation on Valentine's Day night. And man,
Well, my issue is flowers, right? So the entire flower, card, and chocolate industry, they like triple and quadruple prices.
Right.
Because they think they've got you over the barrel.
Right.
Well, I just refused the barrel.
Right.
I refused to be bent over, sir.
Like cake or death, like chicken.
Right.
Like,
I'm like, nah, you can't. I'm
chicken.
not playing these games. And it's, Carrie thought I was joking at first. She thought it would
Right.
pass after a year or two. She apparently didn't know me that well. And
Here we are in 2024.
well, and it's like I told her, I said, look, if you need me to waste money on a weird day randomly that Hallmark invented, then like, what are we doing? Like, if you don't know that I love you, then like, what are we doing? And so ever since then, she pretty much gave herself the green light to buy herself flowers. And I'm like,
Boom.
that's fine. You go to Sam's Club or whatever and buy some reasonably priced flowers for yourself, and I'm okay with that. But
Buy
I
flowers. I
have
can't even buy
opted out.
Delaney flowers because she's
Let
buying
us know what you
flowers.
think in the comments section.
I mean, bring it. Hey, so let's talk about what, the real story behind Valentine's Day, right? Roman legionnaires weren't allowed to marry because the Romans wanted them to be lean and mean and not be thinking about families while they were off fighting. And the
Women,
church
weakened
didn't want
legs.
they didn't want those soldiers, doing married type things with women that they weren't married. So they were doing secret marriages, right? In the name of love, dude got found out and got murdered. Like that's Valentine's Day in a nutshell. So you want to celebrate the real Valentine's Day. You want to know why it's all about hearts and blood. It's red because of blood, not because of the color of roses.
Well, I mean, we probably have a lot of women that watch true crime documentaries and serial killer stuff, so they probably fantasize about their stupid husband getting murdered. And Valentine's Day is a perfect day for that because I'm sure he'll piss you off somehow.
Roll them bones.
Let's do this.
I didn't know we were going to be talking about this, so I didn't do any research.
Well,
You
I
did
did this.
research on
This was my Oppo research that I did on my own years ago to validate my own point. So, like, feel free to look it up. Y'all can fact check me. Everybody's always fact checking Brian. Feel free to fact check me on this. But Valentine's Day is a farce. Canceled.
Jehovah's Witnesses didn't celebrate Valentine's Day.
So. Another reason I like them J-dubs. I'm with them all the way up until that whole Jesus part. Like, that's the only thing I'm falling apart with. Other than that, J-dubs seem to be doing pretty good.
I do miss collecting all the little cards with superheroes and cartoon characters in school.
Right. Or
you bring your whole class one.
All the kids didn't get some from everybody, and then like they made you bring them for everybody because the little nerdy kids didn't get cards.
They never made us do that. And I'd always like the girls I liked, I'd kind of analyze them like, okay, she into me, I can test it from the handwriting on this Valentine. And it was usually
you are the Dark Knight. You were the greatest detective.
I had a pretty reliable system. I always figured out which girls liked me and which didn't by that system.
I could usually tell which girls like me.
That's the story I'm sticking with.
Anyway. It's kind of like when you're playing Heads Up 7-Up and your thumb gets picked and you're like, clearly the girl that digs me, like every time. And I always pick hers too. So, oh, you got me. Oh no, I guess you win. Duck, goose. Oh, I can't catch you. Even though I'm a boy and you're a girl, I'm way faster. Plus, I'm black. Like, come on, I'm catching you if I want to.
All right.
So if you need to hit me up, probably my DMs are open. It's Instagram at Super Dre on this Valentine's Day. Some nonsense. You tell me what a dick I am. That's fine. That's cool. Brian, what's up, man?
The people listening aren't going to believe this, but none of this is scripted. This is all just straight from the hip, from the heart. Yeah, I don't have any. I didn't have any. I'm not. I'm single at the moment, so I didn't do anything for that for Valentine's Day.
Yeah,
I ran a bunch of errands for my daughter because she wasn't ready to throw her party. I had to. Plus, she has a friend that is very Delani-esque with the parties and the visions and this is how it's going to be. So it's probably one of the most elaborate Galentines that you'll ever see. I'm sure if you hit Aubrey up on her Instagram, you can see the vids and the pictures of the setup. But she was a hostess at her own house. So there's a couple times she's kind of like she's grown up and she's doing,
Doing grown up things.
hosting parties. I'm sure her husband was just stuck with the baby upstairs, probably annoyed as hell. Probably should have come over or something. But
Right.
so, like, sorry, dog. Welcome to my family. So,
That's funny.
All right.
all right.
So,
So Brian,
Matt?
where can people find you?
I'm at thethirdhelix.com.
Cool.
That's my blog. Yeah, what's up with you, Matt?
I don't think a lot went on this week. I'm trying to think. So in a couple of days, on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, my daughter will be running the CPAT. I don't know what it stands for. It's the
Nice.
entrance exam for the fire department. So she's trying to become a firefighter here in Oklahoma City. So she's been doing tons of conditioning and studying and prepping and all that kind of stuff. So we're kind of just waiting, hoping, pulling for that to get through. She's pretty stressed, lots riding on the next stage of her life kind of thing. Other than that, I don't think anything else is going on this week. Kind of a slow week. Getting ready for next week, so we'll be doing this show in a different format. We're going to go see General Flynn and do some stuff locally, so that'll be exciting. Other than that, that's about it. So you guys catch me at Matt Moore on X. So what are we talking about today, boys?
Brian's gonna let everyone know if they're going to heaven.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's-
personally, individually, he's gonna call each
Individually,
of
one
you.
by one.
That's one by one.
F in chat if you want to go to heaven.
Yeah. So,
So what does the Bible say about heaven and people, getting there?
well, let me put it this way. I like to preface it with this. If you were to take somebody who is a total foreigner to our culture, never been to church, never watched a Looney Tunes cartoon where they saw, say, an anvil fall on Sylvester the Cat's head and watch his 9 lives
then
go
he-
up to heaven. If you just had no preconceptions, he got locked in a cell for a year with nothing to do but read the Bible, which he did several times before he's released. By the time he got out of that cell, he would have no idea whatsoever about any concept of people dying and going to heaven as a disembodied spirit or soul. That concept does not appear in the Bible in any form whatsoever. It's not. Nobody is ever described as going to heaven when they die. It's never promised by God. It's never prayed for, hoped for, asked for. It's just not a concept on their radar at all. The Bible is about something else entirely different. However, if you have this idea in mind about dying and going to heaven, like the Bible is often described as basic instructions before leaving Earth, there's no shortage of passages that would seem to reinforce that if you already have that idea in mind. But again, you would never get that idea from those passages or from the Bible as a whole. You have to bring it with you.
So let me push back on a couple of things, Brian. One, you said nobody, Elijah and Enoch, went to heaven ostensibly.
Well, what I actually said was nobody went to
Died
heaven.
and went to heaven.
Nobody died and went to heaven as a
Got it.
disembodied spirit.
Okay, that's fair. I think you said
But
nobody,
but if you
I think you were
took some
wrapping the two
tours, right?
together.
Like Paul in 2 Corinthians, what was that outer body experience that he had there?
Well, he said whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, but he says he
Right.
went to the third heaven. And by the third heaven, like if you look at the way the word heaven itself shows up in the Bible roughly 680 to 780 times, depending on the translation.
Now, the way I understand heaven, like there's the second heaven would be like
Right.
the
first
skies
heaven-
and the space and the stars and whatnot.
Well,
And third
yeah,
heaven
the-
is
the
the
heaven-
realm that where God dwells.
Right. Exactly. The first heaven would be the dome in the sky. that
Right.
in Genesis, where he talks about how God placed a firmament over
Those damn
the-
flat earthers.
right. And in Hebrew it's Shemayim, in Greek it's Uranos, where we get the word Uranus. Yeah. So I use the more Greek pronunciation Uranos to avoid that, but
To avoid.
Well,
yeah, yeah,
good old Neil
but-
says it's Uranus.
sure.
You
but
urine
the-
in the Uranus?
So the first heaven is the firmament. The second heaven are the sun, moon, and stars that are believed to have been affixed to it. And then, as Dre said, the third heaven is beyond that, whereas the dwelling place of God. And you kind of have the same concept in the Old Testament, where like in Isaiah 6, where it says he had a vision where he saw the Lord seated on his throne, and there the seraphim with 6 wings were there shouting, crying, holy, holy, holy. That's a vision of God on his throne in heaven. Ezekiel has the same thing in chapter 1, where he has the vision of God's throne. And then the prophet Micaiah, when in Second Kings and Second Chronicles, where maybe it's First Kings. Anyway, it's where King Ahab of Israel and King Jehoshaphat of Judah are deciding whether to go to war against Ramoth Gilead, and they call for the prophets to tell them whether to go or not. And Micaiah, the only faithful prophet of the Lord, has this vision of God sitting on his throne, with the angels to his right and to his left, and they're deciding what to do in order to send Ahab
Right. So there's
die.
tons of examples of people having visions of what that third heaven is.
Right.
Why if that's a thing, and that's a place where God dwells, and the goal of us is to be with God, why would we not go there when we die?
Well, that's an interesting question, but it's a question that interestingly, they never thought to ask in the Bible. Which
Okay.
it's interesting that they did have these visions of God and the angels in heaven that the prophets related, and Paul mentioned that, yet nobody had any idea that they would go there. Instead, the picture that you get from the prophets is of heaven coming here, of the kingdom of God coming to earth. And it's right there in the Lord's Prayer, where he says, Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. But we have this idea that we project on the scriptures, so we always somehow assume that your kingdom come means to your kingdom we go. And when Jesus is pictured in the Gospels, where it talks about Jesus going around preaching the good news, the time is fulfilled, the kingdom of God has come near, repent and believe the good news, people always think, oh, he's telling people how to go to heaven. But he's not. You have to bring that idea with you. And also in 1 Corinthians 15, he's rebuking them. He reiterates the gospel, and it's about how Jesus was raised from the dead, and he appeared to Cephas, then the 12, then the 500, then James and all the apostles, last of all to Paul. Whether then it was I or they, this is what we preach, this is what you believed. Then he goes on to say, but if it is preached that Christ has been raised from the dead, how can some of you say there is no resurrection of the dead? If the dead are not raised, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile. You are still in your sins. Our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. More than that, we are then found to be false witnesses about God, because we testified about God that he raised Christ from the dead, but he did not raise Christ from the dead, if in fact the dead are not raised. If only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are to be pitied above all men. So he's talking about the whole point of that is that the prophets didn't say anything about people dying and going to heaven as disembodied spirits. They talked about the general resurrection of the dead at the end of this stage of history, when the Messiah comes to reign on earth. Jesus being raised from the dead is the proof and promise from God of our own resurrection. That's the hope of Christianity. what's interesting, and ironically, people often quote that passage, well, that verse in particular, if only for this life we have hope in Christ, we're to be pitied above all men. When he's making the argument for the resurrection, they take that to mean, oh, if only for this life, which means we go to heaven. But notice what Paul didn't say. He didn't say, if the dead are not raised, at least we have that afterlife in heaven to look forward to. No, it's the resurrection or nothing. There's no other option. Like, that is the hope. If that hope isn't real, if there's no physical bodily resurrection from the dead, as we saw in Christ, then there's no hope offered in Christianity.
But this doesn't Paul also talk about receiving a new body,
Sure.
right?
Yeah,
You shed that body because corpses aren't coming back, right? It's not the zombie apocalypse. It's not people that were cut in pieces or burned to death or in the bottom of the sea that are going to come back, and it's going to be a big death, ugly, weird shit coming up out of the sea, right? You're receiving a body. So why is the notion of heaven any different than being, why is that the sticky point? Why is resurrection the point that says we're not going to heaven?
Well, first of all, in that chapter, he recites a creed that is not that's an early Christian creed. Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures. He was buried,
right,
and he was raised again on the third day according to the scriptures, and he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. The
right.
body that was buried is the one that was raised. The tomb was empty. He didn't abandon that body and get an entirely new one.
So we're doing that too.
That's the point. Yeah, that's the
why. Okay, so we're gonna get our zombie bodies.
Why would they be zombie bodies?
Because Christ's body wasn't decayed.
Right.
It was within 3 days, right? So how is that the same body?
God is able to reconstitute them. And it's not what is
so if it's reconstituted, is it really the same body? Because Paul says specifically that you shed that body and you get your celestial body.
Well, the prophets in Ezekiel 37, it's a very graphic picture that's painted. Ezekiel is shown a valley full of dry bones, and he's asked by God, "Can Son of Man, can these bones live?" And he says, "You know, Lord." And then he says, "Command these bones to come alive." And it's described in terms of bones coming to bone, and ligaments connecting the bones, and sinews and muscles being reconstituted, in skin. And
maybe some dope ass CGI for a film, huh?
Yeah, it's probably been done.
It'd be like the opposite of Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
Or no, not Lost Ark. The other one. The
Lost Ark.
No, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark. When
their faces melted off. The Nazi melts.
No, I'm thinking of the other one.
The Last Crusade. When the
Last Crusade, because he ages like super fast.
So
opposite, because he turns into dust, right? So he'd go backwards from dust.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and if God can raise the dead, period, he can create a universe out of nothing. If he can call things back into life that were dead, which is what Christ's resurrection demonstrated, then he can raise. I mean, it's not the same in the sense of the substance, but there is definitely a continuation. And Daniel says that
I think the way I understood it is Dre, I think you're pulling on a literal string, right? But I think it's the sense is that it will be your body. It will just be a re-image perfect version of what your body was, right? So like if you were, had a bad shoulder or had a stroke or whatever, that stuff's going to be restored, but it's still going to be recognizable as your body in some capacity.
And we're all just going to live here on Earth.
That's what the Bible says.
Then why are we judging angels when it's not their dwelling place?
Because they're the divine council who have been
less than divine,
who have been ruling affairs on earth, and we overtake them. We replace them as the new divine council. They're active in the affairs of this world, and we're going to judge them by what they've done in this world. And the language regarding the resurrection body, also the other big passage from the Old Testament is Daniel chapter 12, where he says, multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will arise, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who made many wise will shine like the stars in heaven forever and ever. But the point is, like the part I'm emphasizing is those multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth, like people who have been dead and buried,
Right.
they're going to rise from the earth. The language that Paul uses in 1 Corinthians to talk about the resurrection, the body that's buried is like a seed. The body that's raised is what the seed grows into. It will be raised imperishable. He says, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. But what he means is mere flesh and blood, because we see that in the case of Jesus, his flesh and blood were raised, but they were glorified. They were translated into a new mode of life that transcends the former mode of life. But yeah, we
Is there a holding cell until that happens? Is there a spot beyond? Does
like
consciousness,
a purgatory or something?
does consciousness have to exist in your body, in your brain? Do you have, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a soul?
Well, if you look at that's kind of a loaded term, soul.
Well, that's why I said for lack of a better term, and I awkwardly described it before.
Yeah, and I don't say
consciousness.
I don't say that to criticize or push back against you, but when we talk about the soul,
Well, that's why I was careful when I said it, because I know what that connotation means to people.
right? And I'm addressing that connotation.
So go ahead. Yeah.
I'm not trying to argue with you. I recognize how careful you were with the wording. I appreciate that. But to the listener who thinks soul, we think of this kind of this life force that,
and not the music that came out of like Detroit or anything. That's something completely different.
Is it though?
That might be a whole show, right? Like,
so yeah. But
or in Memphis, or New Orleans, the soul.
When you read the Bible, the word soul shows up a lot. In the Old Testament, it's translation of the Hebrew word nephesh. In the New Testament, it's a translation of the Greek word psyche, both of which mean like life or self or any kind of life form. When it talks about how when God formed Adam out of the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils, he became a living nephesh, a living soul, a living being. When it talks about the animals that were created on the sixth day, they're all referred to as living nepheshim. There's even a part in Leviticus where a corpse is called a dead nephesh. So a nephesh isn't necessarily this consciousness that survives the death of the body.
It just
and
means
retains
it means a meat suit.
It just means a life, period.
Ew.
And
They're meat sacks.
And the word translated spirit is pneuma in Greek and ruach in Hebrew, both of which just mean breath or wind simultaneously. And a debate could be had over whether spirit is even thought of as a different word in Hebrew and Greek, or whether we just bring that idea to us. In Greco-Roman mythology and in Gnosticism in particular, they had kind of a much stricter dichotomy between flesh and spirit, matter and spirit. And in Gnosticism in particular, they thought that matter was evil, flesh was intrinsically evil, and that salvation came in the form of you get the secret gnosis that redeems your soul, and then your soul escapes from the prison of the body when you die and is rejoined to God. And that's where we get this idea about going to heaven when we die. In Greek mythology, there's all kinds of stories about heroes descending to the underworld and encountering the shades of their dead loved ones in Hades. That's in the Odyssey, it's in the Aeneid. And so that was a common idea in Greco-Roman thought, is spirits surviving the death of the body and going to this other world. You don't really find that in the Bible. There are certain passages that
The
could
closest we
be-
get Sheol, right?
Yeah, well, Sheol is, in the ancient Near East, Sheol was pretty much the same concept. It was the underworld where the dead descended. And you find the same word in the Bible, but if you read it carefully, it doesn't really, it's like they're kind of invoking the concept, but they're not really affirming the common sense of it. Like if you read Ecclesiastes, I don't remember the exact verse, but I promise it's in there. The living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing.
Well, the
and
reason I
Psalm-
bring up Sheol is it's the thing that got my attention with regards to the Apostolic Creed, right?
Right.
Is that because it says in the Apostles' Creed that, when Christ died on the third day, he went to Sheol, and that's always been, I don't want to say problematic or troublesome, but it's been a point of interest to me, right? Because it means something to say that, and I don't know exactly what the inference or the intention is behind reciting that as a creed.
Well, and I do think that is an interesting point, but a couple more verses from the Old Testament that talk about Sheol. Psalm 6, turn, Lord, and deliver me, save me because of your unfailing love. Among the dead, no one proclaims your name. Who praises you from Sheol? If you just look at all the ways that term is used, it's used in kind of a poetic sense. In Isaiah, it talks about the Rephaim and the dead who go down to Sheol and are stirred at the coming of this powerful figure who's being sent there. But there's no sense that humans are going down there and having experiences. In fact, every time it's mentioned, oblivion is the description. The living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. In Sheol, no one praises your name. It's just darkness and nothingness, and like they're not having conscious experiences if you just kind of take every mention of that from the Bible. Regarding the Nicene Creed, yeah, a lot of the early versions say that when he was crucified, dead and buried, descended into hell, raised again on the third day. A lot of churches today don't include that part. They take that part out because it is problematic, because it doesn't actually say that in the Bible. There's a passage in First Peter, right? There's a tradition known as the harrowing of hell, where it's said that Jesus went down into the underworld to preach to the spirits who were to the dead who were there, to preach the gospel to them, and then before he was resurrected. I think we had to look at that passage actually, because
I think we've talked about that once, because I brought this up a while back, and that seems
on the
odd to me.
podcast.
I don't
do it on the
remember. I don't
podcast?
remember if it was or not, but that whole thing just seems odd to me, of Jesus going down and preaching to the dead, because on one hand, like you said, they don't have an experience. They're not experiencing anything, right? So what is he preaching to? On the other thing, it just sounds like he's yamming on them, right? He's taunting them. He's like, should have listened. Bet you wish you had
Yeah.
now, right? Because it's
Yeah,
also, there's a lot of statements that are really clear that there's no recovery from that point, right? So it's like, unless there was an opportunity for those souls, those spirits, those dead to be renewed or reborn or reclaimed, redeemed, it seems like an odd thing to have happen.
Yeah, and it's not like somebody's going to be in hell and then Jesus is going to come and preach to them, and they're going to be like, "Nah,
Get out of here with that."
I'm going to stay here. It's cool."
Yeah.
But that picture it appears first in the book of Enoch. Enoch is like, he goes down to
Right.
he goes down to preach to basically the fallen watchers.
So it's
communicate
like
with them.
the Nicene Creed is like, we're gonna acknowledge Enoch, but we're not gonna
Well,
because it doesn't say that anywhere else. So we're just gonna go ahead
well,
and
we're
stick
getting ahead of
Jesus
ourselves.
in
We're
the
getting ahead of
middle.
ourselves, though.
It's still fun.
Yeah. I mean, the Nicene Creed was quite a few centuries after they stopped paying any attention to First Enoch, and probably they didn't have any copies outside of Ethiopia. But so Enoch
Ethiopia
is
came to the council, didn't they? I would assume they had bishops too, right?
on. I don't know if they're specifically mentioned, but
I never saw the
Is
roll
it
call.
is there a guest list?
Right.
I wanna see this
Did they have a
list.
sign in? They had a sign in sheet.
Saint Nick, leave the club. What are you doing? Like, I don't
think
need clubs. I'll beat this dude's ass with my bare hands.
I think there are numbers listed, but I don't think it's like a roll call.
There's a couple of
specific
names
churches.
that are listed as like the important names that were there kind
Right,
of thing.
right.
But I've never seen a by
Like-
name list.
Like the Bishop of Rome didn't go. He sent some deacons, but so in the book of Enoch, Enoch is the watchers who were cast into the abyss for the Mount Hermon incident. They kind of called Enoch and asked him to go, plead with God on their behalf to let him out of there. And so he prays, and that he gets he's taken up into heaven, and he has his vision, and the archangels basically tell him, no, go tell those guys that they're screwed. They're going to get what's coming to them. And so Enoch goes back down to Sheol, and he tells them, like, sorry, I did my best. You guys are here for till judgment day. Sorry.
That's why when you send a human to do a damn watcher's work, blows
So-
it.
The passage in Second Peter, for if God did not spare angels, no, that's not the one I'm talking about. It's the one about, okay, I'm in the wrong book. My bad. Bear with me, everybody. I apologize. I didn't, we don't script this. It's all as we, off the top of our
Babies.
heads.
We just lost like 3 subscribers right there. Like, oh, they're not even prepared. I'm
Yeah.
out. What do you mean you don't script it? Everyone scripts it.
So while he's looking that up, so we hit some earlier things that were interesting, and I'm just going to lob some more thoughts out here to keep the conversation going. But I know, Brian, while you're looking, that people that would be of the pro disembodied heaven variety would immediately jump to verses like John 14:2, 14:3, as kind of one of their big ahas, right? And for those that don't know those verses, it's essentially the verse. A lot of people know Jesus says, "I tell you, my Father's house has many mansions." Right? I would tell you if this weren't the case. And then the other one, John 14:3, is when he says, "I go to prepare a place for you." Right? And most people infer in both of those verses that the reference of the many mansions is reference to our places in heaven, down the golden streets, and the diamond lined whatevers, and then his comment about preparing a place for you, that's what he's referencing, as he's saying, I'll be back because I got to go finish, I got to oversee construction.
Yeah.
While we're building your houses, right? Like that's
in Hebrews, they say heaven will be a city built for worship. Revelations has lots of descriptions of heaven.
Well, in fairness of Revelations, it's just descriptions, right? It doesn't say anything about us being there. It just talks about it. It's more illustrative than it is predictive, right?
Heaven will be filled with peace and joy and praise.
Oh,
I mean,
What are you reading that from?
Revelation 7:15-17.
We should take these in turn, like one at a
yeah,
time.
no, I was just throwing
yeah,
out. I
we-
was just
yes.
throwing out things
So,
while
like-
you were looking up your verse. I wasn't trying to. I wasn't segueing the show. Just making throwing out the obvious softballs, right? Like these are the things that people are going to say. But it says this, it says that, and what else could it mean? And the last one is Luke 23:43, which we've talked about a handful of times here for different purposes. But that was when Christ was on the cross, and he's speaking to his fellow crucified members, and he says, surely today you will be with me in paradise, right?
Yeah.
So those I feel like those are the biggest low-hanging fruit when it comes to disembodied heaven.
And there's also the 2 Corinthians 5 verse about being away from the body and at home with the Lord. Which by the way, I have a blog where I cover all of these. We'll link it
Do
in the
you?
description.
All right.
Yeah, you did. Did you
Right
know
on.
that? Yeah. So but we're gonna talk about it here too. We're gonna cover all that, but I don't want to end this before we talk about what Christianity actually is. You know, after we go through what it's not, I want to talk about what it is. Some of that we're going to cover in addressing these passages, but the big thing that we're missing, we need to home in on that, as that's more important than even knocking down what it's not. But the passage I was looking for was 1 Peter 3. Sorry, computer problems. We're professionals.
You say you're having a Peter problem?
1 Peter 3.
They got a blue pill for that.
Verse 18 and on. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, to bring you to God. He was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit. So it's important to home in on that. There's this dichotomy here: put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit. Clearly, he's talking about the resurrection. That's always what's in view when they talk about Christ being made alive after he being put to death. So that's important to consider. Verse 19, after being made alive, he went and made proclamation to the imprisoned spirit. He went and made proclamation to the imprisoned spirit, to those who were disobedient long ago, when God waited patiently in the days of Noah while the ark was being built. In it, only a few people, 8 in all, were saved through water. And in this, water symbolizes baptism, but now saves you also, not the removal of dirt from the body, but the pledge of a clear conscience toward God. It saves you by the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at God's right hand, with angels, authorities, and powers in submission to him. I take that to mean that he, and I didn't pick the best translation there. Check your translations at home, and you'll find that it's a little iffy how that one was. I take that to mean that the same spirit who raised Jesus is the spirit who preached to the spirits now imprisoned, who died during the days of Noah, meaning that the spirit who preached through Noah is the same spirit who raised Jesus. If it's it just doesn't make any sense, according to the logic of the passage, that he was raised from that in the spirit while he was dead. He went and preached to the spirits in prison, because that's not the sense of what it means to be made alive by the Spirit. It's clearly talking about resurrection. So it's kind of a clumsily translated passage. Some translations have it better, but you can see that yourself when you check it. But
what was the verse again? 1 Peter 3:18.
Yeah. And it's also worth pointing out that when he told the thief on the cross, I tell you the truth, today you'll be with me in paradise. If Jesus descended into hell between his death and resurrection in order to preach to the condemned spirits, well, then he wasn't with the thief on the cross in heaven that day. He was in hell. So if we read it that way, that would be a contradiction.
You know what? That's an interesting point. I actually hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, is it a day trip? Like, where he spent 24 hours in hell? Like, hold on. What does today mean to Jesus when he's talking about going to paradise? I mean, I don't think that debunks anything at all. Like,
well, hang on. It's interesting though. The point it does to me, it's a little bit different. So if he's telling the thief, hey, we're going to be in paradise today, and then we interpret that to mean heaven as a disembodied spirit, Jesus didn't go to heaven that day. So he clearly was speaking either metaphorically or in some kind of, I mean, again, we've talked about this before. Christ was oftentimes not speaking in the most linearly plain language possible.
So,
right?
so when you say with me, I mean, we talk about Jesus as if he's three distinct personages, right?
Mhm.
As so when he said, when you say you're with me, I mean, would he have had to say you'll be with the Father in paradise
No,
and not
no.
with
So,
me?
so,
So
my
I mean, and
yeah.
that's what I'm saying. So you're telling me that he can raise all these bones, and he can put all this flesh back together, but he can't be everywhere all the time at once?
he couldn't for the purposes of what he was doing is the
I
way
don't
I understand it, right? Like,
I don't know
so,
about that.
and that's fine.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, yeah,
we're clearly in an interpretation space where there is
sure.
no 100% locked. This is
Okay.
the answer, right? Like, so I'm going to jump ahead real quick for purposes of clarifying this, and we can circle back around, Brian.
Sure.
But Dre asked the question: is there a holding room? Is there a waiting room? A lobby? Purgatory? Sheol? Whatever, right? And we haven't said soul sleep yet, but that's what I think, right? And we can talk about later as we get to this, because this show is going to wind around, and this may be a multi-part show. Let's find out. But I believe in the concept of soul sleep, and then I'll jump forward to jump back. And soul sleep is, simply put, lights go out, zero sensory experience. There's nothing going on. There's no consciousness until Christ's return, right? At which point everybody who had died in Christ wakes up. To any body that happens to, it's going to feel like today when it happens. So I think Christ was basically explaining the concept of soul sleep. Basically, he didn't have time or the energy, bluntly. The man's being crucified. He can't breathe. His lungs are being distended. He's probably pooling fluids in his lungs, all kinds of, he's dehydrated. There's all kinds of stuff going on.
You have to economize your words.
Right. He was in bad shape. He can't be like, all right, bro, listen, I got to tell you a long story. He didn't have that kind of physical ability, right?
Get your quill out. I'm talking right now.
Right. So I think he was just like, bro, look, you're good. I'll see you soon. Trust me, this is going to be quick. And to him, it will be, because he's still in soul sleep. So that's my spoiler.
With you saying
alert.
that, this just popped into my head. So that's our concept of time and space.
Mm-hmm. He wasn't speaking in his time and space.
But I'm saying, how do we know that hasn't already happened? Right? Because God stands outside of time and space, right? So the soul sleep, maybe there isn't, because we're on our timeline and there's another
that's
multiverse. I don't know, right?
Who knows if there's some sequential time phasing and God's using like time multiplexing to get all the souls where they need. Like, who knows what's really going on, right? It's nerd alert, by the way, if anybody doesn't know what multiplexing is. Gunny Bundy, there you go. Like, you got a little nod to wink there. And if you don't know what multiplexing is, you freaking boot. Go talk to Andre later on and he'll explain it to you.
For the people at home, a boot is like a brand new Marine who is basically a dork who doesn't know anything.
They use it a lot in The Rookie, this show that I'm watching recently. I know it came out.
Or boot?
Boot. Because boot. What are you talking about?
Because Nathan Fillion is Canadian.
Son of a. Actually, like
with
half the actors
with
on
his
that show.
beady eyes and his floppy head.
Floppy little heads. So
he's gonna go on strike if you keep pushing him.
But anyway, Dre, that's my like quick way to wrap up that one specific situation, right?
Okay,
and I think it makes, for me, like for my headcanon and my internal theology, it makes a whole lot of sense. And it makes the problem fade away, which is part of what we're looking for here, right? Is to make these things make sense that are weird and hard to parse.
Yeah, and I'm I could say a lot about that, but it's actually in my blog. I address those very questions.
Dope.
And so I'm
the thirdhelix.com.
Yeah. We'll put the specific blog in the description, but
so when Paul's talking in 2 Corinthians, is it 12:2, when he talks about seeing the third heaven, is that an NDE from when he was stoned at Lystra?
I mean,
it's a Bible fan theory.
Clarification. Hang on. 2 clarifications. NDE means near death experience, and Dre means stoned in the biblical sense, not in the marijuana sense. Just clarifying everything. For everybody
Correct. Thank
listening,
you.
In case
Thank you for
anybody's
that.
like, wait, Paul got stoned? What?
Yeah, you heard it
Paul
here.
just lit
Paul
up
was
and
a-
like, no wonder he made it to the third heaven.
Paul was a pothead, and he went to heaven in a.
That's
pot
why we
vision.
should make it
It's not what
legal,
we're
man.
saying.
The great apostle.
To answer your question, Paul is.
I don't think the math
extremely-
works out, but
He's extremely sparse on details about that, but it fits pretty neatly into the precedent that we've already talked about of prophets having visions of God on his throne in heaven, where they're, they don't go into detail about whether they are, when Isaiah saw his vision in chapter 6 of the Lord seated on his throne, was he physically bodily transported, or was it just happening inside of his own
actually
consciousness?
to support what you've been saying for the last hour, it's interesting to me, all the people that have the visions of heaven, and there's 10 descriptions of heaven just off the top of anything you look up. They never say they see someone else, right? It would be different if Isaiah or Paul said, when I saw him seated on the throne, and then I saw my Aunt
Kimmy,
Marge,
and I saw my
she
neighbor.
she was chilling there, and then I saw my dog Duchess. I miss that dog, right?
That's an interesting point.
None of that gets said.
Moses was waving at me.
Moses is like, dog, I told you, right?
But they do talk about angels and seeing God and seeing Jesus.
Never talk about other people.
It's interesting.
So if people did die and go to heaven, and people actually got a vision of heaven, why didn't they see their ancestors before them?
Well, because they were all heretics.
I mean, that's a possibility. It's a possibility, except for Enoch and Elijah.
Right. Now, what if they said, hey, so I went to heaven and I saw 2 dudes walking around. They were old as hell. And then I saw Jesus. It'd be like, yo, you were really in heaven.
Right. Man, there's nobody there. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. So did we leave anything out from
Ryan doesn't know what to do with that. I got one other thing that
do we want to tackle
heaven?
John 14?
We can. Yeah, but real quick, one other verse I want to toss just to put it on the table, right, is Revelation 21.
Okay.
And this one's interesting, right? So Revelation 21:1, I'm not going to even read it. It simply says, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and earth had ceased to exist, and the sea existed no more. Right. And it goes on and says other things. But I think that's super important to put in the conversation as well. I know that the sea reference has to do with that whole primeval firmament, the dark waters and all of that, right? So there's something there that's more theological than it is geological, right, with regards to the water not being there. But
yeah,
the whole new heaven and new earth is really interesting, right?
Well, let me explain that.
That's fine. I was all I was gonna say is the new earth is easy to understand, because anybody that talks about the Edenic redemption, the earth is going to be remade perfectly. But it's the heaven part that's really odd to me, because that's the only verse I'm aware of that talks about heaven being recast or rebuilt.
Are you saying that only Jesus can fix climate change? I mean, he's the only one who can teach you a curveball.
He can hit a curveball. If he can hit a curveball, he can do climate change.
That's right.
Jesus and the UN. So that verse, Revelation 21. It's important to point out he's kind of echoing the language of Genesis 1, which Genesis 1 is, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Hebrew is tohu and bohu, without shape, without substance. And the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the deep, and there was just endless water in the primeval conception. That verse bookends, and it's weird that as Frank Turek likes to say all the time, and I wholeheartedly agree, there are no verses in the Bible. Like the chapter and verse divisions are
We
entirely
reinvented that.
yeah, that's entirely artificial. That's not how the original readers saw it. And it's weird to me that they divide Genesis 1 and 2 where they do, because you get the first
But
6
you
days
get
of
two creation stories.
I'm not sure, that's debatable, but that's not what I'm getting at here. You get days 1 through 6 in Genesis chapter 1, and then Genesis chapter 2, it reads, "Thus the heavens and the earth were created in their vast array." So a lot of people read Genesis 1 to be one event. God created the heavens and the earth. And then day 1 is another event that follows after that. That's not what the text is saying. The bookends of Genesis 1:1 and 2:1 kind of they summarize what's in between. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Thus, the heavens and the earth were created in their vast array. So those 6 days of creation are what are being talked about by the creation of the heavens and the earth. And you have God creates time on day 1 by separating light from darkness, creates space on day 2 by separating the waters above from the waters below, creates the earth on day 3 by separating the dry land from the waters below. And then he kind of creates these realms or these functions, and then he fills the realms or provides the functionaries on days 4 through 6. Creates time on day 1, creates the clockwork of the heavens on day 3, creates space on day 2, fills the space on day 4, creates earth on day 3, fills the earth with life on day 6, and then thus the heavens and the earth were created in their vast array. And then you have the Sabbath day when God rested, because he's done and he's kind of settling into creation as his temple. So that's the picture you get. In Revelation 1, he's kind of repeating that. It's kind of a recapitulation of Genesis 1 through 2, 1 through 2:1. When he says it sound based on the English translation, it sounds like he destroys the heavens and the earth and then recreates from scratch a new heavens and the earth.
Mhm.
That's not what the Greek says. In Greek, there are 2 different words for new. There's neo, which speaks of newness in time, like a brand new like current model car right off the factory floor is a neo car. The other word for new is kainos, which means new in quality, new in condition, like a 1967 Shelby Mustang restored to its original pristine condition, but with satellite XM radio and anti-lock brakes and all the modern bells and whistles. That's a Kainos car. It's not a Neo car. And you see this in when Jesus talks about new wine being put into new wineskins. He says it's Neo wine. The wine is freshly squeezed and fermented, and the wine is new in time, put into new wineskins. And he says Kainos wineskins because it's the condition that's in view. It doesn't matter how long ago the wineskins were made. What matters is that they haven't been used yet, so they're not dried up or leaky or prone to burst. In Revelation 21, when he says he will create a new heavens and a new earth, it's a Kainos heaven and a Kainos earth.
I'm not following what you're trying to say.
So
Because so hang on. I'm looking at Strong's,
okay.
and I looked up Kainos because I'm trying to follow along with you.
Okay.
And the usage, the definition is new/fresh for Kainos.
Right.
And as usage, it means fresh, new, unused, novel.
Right.
And you're juxtaposing that to what word?
Neo. Like Keanu Reeves from The Matrix.
Right.
Like you neo-Nazi fascists, you neo-commie.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not like old communism or Nazism just restored. You're like the new version of that. It's like
so this says for Neos, the usage is, it says definition is a new moon, which I don't know what that means, but it says young, youthful, but then it also says new and fresh. And you're right, they are specifically making reference. I see about they put wine new into wineskins. I mean, so I'm following, but they also mention kanos
But I don't know that
in different
when,
translations. It's almost like those two words get used interchangeably.
so Matt, did you when you read that scripture in Revelation, were you meaning that the earth
I,
would just
I,
disappear and he'd have a brand new one, or it would just be
it,
restored?
I, to be honest, I didn't put a whole lot of thought into that part of it, right? Like I wasn't
Or was
wasn't
that Brian
pressed.
just saying like, "Hey, I get it, but just so no one's confused."
I think that's what it was.
Yeah,
But now I have,
like,
I
we're
have
not
more questions
God
now
isn't blowing up the heavens and the earth and just
as I'm
creating
trying
new
to,
ones out of scratch. He's
right,
restoring
right.
the heavens and the earth.
And it doesn't matter to me which way, right? It doesn't matter
Right.
if it's an Eros or a Neos or a Kanos new. My point was the
It's not the
concept
same.
of the earth being reborn is familiar to me. The concept of heaven being redone was new to
Okay.
me. That was the only point that I was making.
Well, but my point is, it's not that heaven as this, the afterlife is you're getting that there's a new afterlife. It's talking about it specifically in terms of creation itself.
No, it's speaking about
being-
it as a noun heaven, not a state of being. It's saying both the earth and heaven are being redone because the old is gone. And whether
The
it
third
means
heaven where God dwells, right?
whether
And
it
if
means
that
the
comes to
old is
earth,
gone away because it's no longer needed, it's obsolete, or a big nuclear bomb went off and blew everybody up. Like whatever the reason is irrelevant to me.
or
I'm simply
Nibiru
pointing
came
out.
into the orbit and had
I'm
another
simply
cataclysm.
I'm simply pointing out that I'd never before seen any verse that mentioned a new heaven. That's all I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
I'm not trying to read any more into it than that. I simply pointed out that was
Right. Well, that's actually quoting Isaiah, where he says that he'll create a new heavens and a new earth. But my point is that when you read Genesis 1 through 2:1, it's not talking about heaven in the sense that we commonly think. It's the heavens and the earth, meaning the sun, moon, and stars, and the earth.
Which is the first and second heaven.
Right.
Right.
So when it talks about, so in Genesis 21, so there's this idea that like people read that and they bring this idea of going to heaven when they die as a disembodied spirit to the text, and that's really not what's going on. You'll notice that like the New Jerusalem, which is the city where God dwells, that comes down out of heaven to earth. Like the whole picture of it is the renewal and restoration of this earth. Like we don't abandon this world to go off to another world. It's about saving this world. And Christians will often talk about problems in this world, solving them as if you're just polishing the brass on the Titanic, because we're all going to abandon it and go off to escape to some other world anyway. So what does it matter? That's totally unbiblical. What the Bible actually, what Christianity, what the gospel is about, it is about the salvation of this world. If you're not, and it's right there in the Lord's Prayer, our Father in heaven, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This idea about dying and going off to some other world, well, that's a different religion. That's not Christianity. We're so preoccupied with individual salvation as disembodied spirits that we kind of miss the main thing that the Bible is really about. And that's a big part of why the church is collectively functionally apostate today. We're not thinking in terms that Jesus had in mind when he himself was preaching the gospel. And in Acts 3, if I recommend everybody like go through the book of Acts and just read all of the sermons that appear there. I mean, the whole thing is worth reading, of course, but just to kind of get a sense of what the early Christian message was, read those sermons and look at the things that they're promising. Look at what they're holding out as the hope. They don't talk about anybody, hey, if you believe that Jesus is the Messiah, so you can go to heaven when you die. It is all about heaven coming here. And in Acts 3, they specifically mention, repent then and turn to God so that your sins may be wiped out, that times of refreshing may come from the Lord, and that he may send the Messiah who has been appointed for you, even Jesus. Heaven must receive him until the time comes for God to restore everything as he promised long ago through his holy prophets. And the point is, like, he's there in heaven for now until his enemies have been made footstools under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. Part of that is him coming and reigning here on earth to arbitrate between the nations, to repay everyone according to what has been done. And salvation is getting to take part in that kingdom here on this planet. And so you guys, I mean, there's a ton more I could say about that. You guys want to tackle John 14?
Sure. And by the way, I think maybe I understand the Kanos versus Neo thing. And I think you said it, but I just wanted to restate it because it kind of went over my head to start with. For anybody that cares, Kanos means fresh more so than new in the sense of unused, but it doesn't have to do with years. So a way to describe it would be a brand new car that's a 2024 model would be Neo. You could have an old car that was what car guys would call a barn find, where the car had just been sitting and had like 200 miles on the odometer. It would be Kanos. It wouldn't be Neo, but like a new invention could be considered fresh and new. So you could have like a new type of car, like a hybrid with, a new type of transmission that could be both, because it would be fresh in the sense of hadn't been done before, but also as new as and just been built. So it can be both, or it can be one or the other. To be honest, what in either of those words and the splitting of the hairs means in relation to Revelation 21, I'm not sure how it would matter to the reading of it, unless somebody was just hell-bent on deciding that heaven gets blown up. I don't know. But to be honest, it actually is odder that it's Kanos versus Neo. Now that I'm understanding the word differential, because you're right, the Greek does say Kanos. I just looked at the interlinear.
Yeah.
So it says it's a Kanos heaven, which makes it sound like heaven hasn't been used, which is really weird.
Well,
that's even weirder
because there's only two dudes there.
Right? Four.
Right.
There's God and Jesus and Enoch and
You want to
Elisha.
watch the
the
game?
reason I bring the reason I bring it up is that often when I have these discussions with people and I explain how like this dying and going to heaven idea is not in the Bible, it's about the renewal and restoration of this earth, of this creation. People often bring up Revelation 21 to say, aha, see here it says this earth isn't destroyed. I mean, it's not restored and renewed to its Edenic state. It's destroyed. And then heaven, and then there's a new heaven, and that's where we live. And then I challenge them, no, read more closely. It's a new heaven and a new earth in the sense of the restoration of what's being described in Genesis 1. It's an echoing and recapitulation of that language. And the actual Greek is Kanos, not Neo. So it is the restoration and renewal of this world. And I know that the language says, for the old heaven and earth has passed away. You find similar language in 2 Peter 3, where he talks about the flood, how the world was created out of water and destroyed by water. But nobody reading Genesis 1, to be fair and honest, if they're reading it correctly, it does. If you unpackage the cultural language, it does read like a kind of hitting of the rewind on the Big Bang and doing the Big Bang again.
That's kind of how it reads to me. Another side note for anybody who's becoming, word nerds out there with us, the Greek for to go away, when it talks about this renewal of, or this, the new earth and the new heaven, because the old earth and heaven went away. The Greek word for went away is Abercrombie. not really, but it is. It's Abercrombie, which I can't help but think is where the word Abercrombie comes from. Because where the hell else would the word Abercrombie come from?
And that
Which
store
means-
went away. So
well, you should go away from it.
you
It's
You-
got naked children like on the walls. Like you should
can't
throw away.
you can't escape the smell. It's
Right.
over.
It's like
It's in your
douchey.
pores.
It's terrible.
I can't remember the last
Lousy.
time I
No
Naked
good.
children on the wall.
It does.
It's like a Podesta living room.
It really is. It's like it's all artsy and in black and white, and it smells like Axe body wash. It's terrible.
Hey, you see that Podesta's taking over for John Kerry as the climate czar?
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. I didn't see that. I'm gonna have to look into that. That
He should Abercrombie.
so John 14. You guys wanna
Yeah.
do that?
Yep.
What
let's
about
do
it?
So he says, in my father's house are many, and the Greek word is Monet. I go there to prepare a place for you. And people typically that's typically the go-to passage when I challenge this idea of dying and going to heaven.
Mhm.
First of all, well, just for some background, in my father's house are many mansions. That was actually that came from the Wycliffe Bible. At the time, the word mansion.
Heretic.
Yeah, the time the word mansion just meant, and John Wycliffe was what was he like? 14th century. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But Englishman translated the Bible.
This one says rooms.
Well, yeah.
The NIV.
At the time, the Greek is Monet. At the time when Wycliffe translated it, a mansion was any kind of domicile, like a palatial estate would have been a mansion, just as much as a mud hut on the beach would have been a mansion.
I
And-
learned that when I lived in Japan. I lived in mansions, and the same thing. England also
yeah?
uses the term mansion, and it's not what we say. it is.
Not palatial.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But it sounds good. We like the idea of getting mansions in heaven, so we kind of kept it in a lot of translations, but it really just means any kind of dwelling place. But more importantly than that, when Jesus says, in my father's house, well, what does my father's house mean? We take it for granted that it means heaven, and it can't mean anything else. But if we look at every other instance, Jesus uses he uses it precisely 2 other times. And it means the same thing in those usages as the phrase God's house means in every other usage in the Bible, which is never heaven. It's always the temple.
Say that again.
When the phrase God's house appears in the Bible, never does it mean heaven.
Oh, God's house. I thought you meant when other times Jesus used Monet. Okay.
Well, no, when Jesus used the phrase God, in my father's house.
In my father's house. Okay.
Yeah, it means the same as God's house, which is the temple. How dare you turn my father's house into a marketplace? Why are you looking for me? Didn't you know I'd be in my father's house, meaning the temple? So when he says in my father's house are many Monet, many dwelling places, many rooms, and they were puzzled about this because speaking
They're
of
like,
God,
why are there rooms in a temple?
right, like, well, specifically the dwelling place was where the holy, that was another description for the Holy of Holies. It's where God's presence was understood.
And only the high priests were allowed after they did all the ritual cleansings and put on the fancy clothes
Right.
and did the sacrifices and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Like people just
They weren't just chilling and hanging out and
Well,
living
so-
there.
So in this instance, when he talks about my father's house has many rooms,
Mhm.
is he not talking about the third heaven, the place where God dwells?
No.
I think so.
Why? So he's talking about the temple.
Let me.
So this temple,
hang-
God's house,
I'm,
has many
I'm going to
rooms?
jump ahead because I've never heard Brian say this before, but I already picked up what he's laying down. This is Jesus saying. This is essentially Christ stating overtly that the Holy of Holies is no longer relevant, because something that was only available to one person, the high priest before, now has many places where you can come and live. You can be that close and that intimate with the Father in his house which would have been scandalous to a rabbi of the time, because not only could that rabbi not go, but all of his buddies couldn't go. Only the boss rabbi could go in there.
Well, the
And
high
now that
priest.
Roman soldier can go.
Right. And now, yeah, the dude being crucified on this cross can go,
Right. Yeah.
and he can live there, not just walk in. Like, he can just do whatever he wants. He can chill. He can make yourself comfortable. yourself
Mikasa
at home.
Sukasa.
Right. Can I shoot up here? Absolutely. Mikasa Sukasa.
Come on. too far. Too far.
The point of it making somebody at home is not too far.
Well,
I'm pretty sure nobody's shooting up at God's house.
Right. But
Well,
but
I
he
mean, if
wasn't-
you're in that blissful state, you don't need to shoot up.
Right.
But and it's important to read this in the context of John's gospel as a whole. And to reiterate, there are no verses in the Bible. For some reason, John's gospel, that we have the chapter divisions in John's gospel, we have it in weird places. I would make the middle of John chapter 2. John chapter 2, that starts with the wedding in Cana, where he turns water into wine, and then he travels to Jerusalem, where he drives out the money changers, and that's where you get the phrase, "And how dare you turn my father's house into a marketplace." I would take that. I would make that the beginning of a chapter, and then take that to the end of chapter 4, because that whole portion is about how the temple is obsolete. It's going to be obsolete. Because he says, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days," not referring to the actual temple, but his body, referencing his resurrection. So his body is the temple, because the temple is the place where God's presence dwells. And that's the whole kind of, that's really sort of, I don't know if we were talking about this on the podcast or just between the three of us, but I was talking about how they always kind of mess up the movies about the Exodus, like the 10 Commandments and Prince of Egypt. Was that on the podcast, or was that just us? But
Yeah,
It was just,
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't remember.
okay.
I don't even know what our last podcast was about. So
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. If you watch like the 10 Commandments or the Prince of Egypt, like the climax of the movie, the big happy ending that you get before the credits roll is Moses kind of sauntering down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments, as if that's the point of the narrative. If you read the book of Exodus, the last chapter is like, they've had the law. God gave them the law. They broke the law. While Moses was on the mountain getting the instructions for the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle, these physical, visible symbols of God's presence that were to be that were to be the focus of worship. While he's getting the instructions for that, they're down at the base of the mountain saying, "Where's this Moses guy? We don't know what happened to him. You, Aaron, make us gods to go before us." So he gives them the golden calf. Then he says, "Behold, Yahweh, your God, who led you out of Egypt." And then they're debauching themselves around the golden calf. And the juxtaposition here, the point here is that, like, people do need that kind of visible, tangible representation of God to worship, to be the focus of their worship. They were getting that. God was giving that to Moses, but they couldn't wait. They didn't trust him. They didn't have faith. So they invented that for themselves in the form of the golden calf. And the golden calf was a common image for Baal, who became kind of the symbol for the devil. That's why the devil has horns, because he's often like a calf is like a young bull. And so, because of this, God said, I'm going to destroy them and make a nation out of you, Moses. Moses says, "No, don't." He intercedes for them and pleads for God's forgiveness. So he gives it. And then God says, "Well, I'm going to send an angel to lead you guys, because if I go, I'm going to kill all of you, because I'm done with you." And then Moses pleads with them again, please don't. If you don't lead us, then there's no point in even being your people. Please, don't leave us to lesser to lesser beings, you go with us. And he pleads with God to show him his glory, which he does. And so God, graciously acquiesces, and because Moses interceded, he decides to stay with them. And so the big climax of Exodus is when they build the tabernacle and the ark, and they consecrate it. They could do all the sacrifices. And then you see the glory cloud of God's presence descending to dwell within the tabernacle. And then so God is with them. God, despite their unworthiness, despite God's initial inclination to abandon them and have and give them over to a lesser divine being, he stays with them. And you see this again when Solomon consecrates the temple. The Shekinah, the glory cloud of God's presence, descends upon the temple, and that's God dwelling among them. Before the exile, during the exile, but before the Babylonians destroyed the temple, the prophet Ezekiel had a vision of the Shekinah, the glory cloud of God's presence, leaving the temple. So God has because they're unfaithful, because they're worshiping other gods, God gives them over to be dominated by the Babylonians and live under the domination of their gods. And so that idea of still being in exile because the presence of God was not with them anymore. This is like forefront in their minds when Jesus arrives. And in John's gospel, when he talks about how the logos, the word of God became flesh, the Greek word, I forget the actual, I think it's related to Monet, it's Mino, but he tabernacled among us, and that kind of evokes the Exodus. The logos tabernacled among us and dwelled among us. That was like, so Jesus was that picture of God tabernacling among them in the wilderness, God's presence being among them. And the whole thrust of John's gospel is how God's presence, that Shekinah cloud of God's glory, is going to be restored to them, and he's telling them how. And so when he tells them, destroy this temple, I will raise it again in 3 days, and then he talks to Nicodemus about being born again in the Spirit, and then he has the conversation with the woman in Samaria at the well, and they have this debate about, you Jews say we have to worship on Mount Sinai, but our ancestors say worship on Mount Gerizim. And Jesus tells them, you worship, the time is coming when people will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor on that mountain, but the true worshipers will worship God in spirit and in truth. And the whole point of it is that this physical temple is going to be obsolete because God is going to dwell within people. And that's what he's talking about. So John 14, when he says, in my Father's house are many dwelling places, I go there to prepare a place for you. And then they ask him, well, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? I am the way and the truth and the life.
Right.
No one comes to the Father except through me.
That actually makes a lot more sense, Brian. So,
but then hold on, I'm about done. Like if you read the rest of John 14, he goes on to talk about the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. I'm going to make my home in you. The Father, just as the Father is in me, I will be in you. And in who loves the Father and does and obeys my commandments, we will make our home with them. So that's what John 14 is about. It's not about going to heaven as a disembodied spirit.
Well,
it's about God dwelling in you as the new temple.
God says, I will come back and take you with me.
Let me read the actual context.
And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you will also be where I am.
Right.
So he's going to prepare a place, and then he's coming back to get you.
So if you follow the same kind of, I'm trying to hypersimplify what Brian was saying, right? So if what he was saying is my Father's house, and he's talking about the temple, so he's being metaphorical. He's not being literal in the sense that we're all going to go crowd into a temple like a bunch of like Haitian refugees. He's saying this is now a place for everybody, right? Then he says, I'm going to go prepare a place. He's going to go die. so that we can then go into the temple, because those laws, no matter, are relevant, right? He's going to go create the new covenant. He's going to go,
And
I shouldn't say create, he's going to go bind the new covenant, right?
Right.
And then he's going to come back through the Spirit so that we can live with God. in
And
his
that's why I brought
house,
it up,
right?
to
Yeah.
tie all that up into a bow.
Yeah, 100%. It's like,
I knew that was the
it's-
answer. I just
It's right. No, I'm
Yeah,
with
so-
you. Like, this is, it's a cool conversational path, right? Though, because I've never actually torn these verses apart to understand this part of it. Like, I literally brought them up because I know this is where people push back on it, right? But like I said earlier in the show, and I've said a couple of times, Christ was typically a little metaphorical in how he talked. Not that he didn't mean what he said, but what he said can't be taken at face value with today's, translation and transliteration of the words.
and
It's actually
and those
interesting.
readers at that time would have understood that.
Probably. Yeah.
Um,
At least better than we do.
Yeah, I hope so.
To Brian's point, because anytime they said house of God, they always meant the temple. We don't typically talk about temples, right? And many denominations of Protestantism are a little fast and loose with what a church is, right? Like,
It's a house of
like
God.
well, no, but I'm saying, like, my church, it used to be in a strip mall, right? It's
Right.
it's a far cry from the idea of a a big cathedral and stained glass and pews and
But if the Spirit's
like
there,
like the tag agency is 2 doors down,
right? Yeah,
and I had a bakery next door and a dentist on the other side of it, right? Like,
probably
and a
smelled
bank,
pretty nice anyway.
and a bank in the parking lot, right?
yeah,
Like,
the church is not the building. The church
Right.
is the people.
the people, right?
Church means assembly.
But it was 100% the building back in this time period, right? Like the temple,
Well,
like to the point of
yeah.
the point of Jesus and the Samaritan having the conversation, right? Like, they were arguing about which mountain is more important to worship on, because that was relevant back then. Or even was it the Egyptian or the eunuch, and wanted to take dirt with him.
The Naaman the Syrian.
The Syrian. He wanted to take dirt from the Holy Land,
Right.
because he was going to be forced to pray at his master's
Right.
temple, but he wanted to pray to this dirt because the dirt was more holy, because he wanted to be praying, ensure he was praying to Yahweh, because this was his land.
Right. And this ties back to the divine council worldview. In Genesis 6, you have the earth is corrupted by this unholy mingling of divine and human natures that led to the Nephilim and this proliferation of forbidden knowledge that led to the flood. And they wanted to kind of reinstate that at the Tower of Babel. And there's evidence that they did. Like the Tower of Babel was a ziggurat. It was a man-made sacred mountain so that the gods could descend to mingle with humanity. There was the sacred bed of Marduk at the top of the great pyramid, the great ziggurat of Etemenanke, which was what the Tower of Babel was based on. It was a bed for sexual congress with mortals, which birthed this new generation of Nephilim. And we've talked about how ancient Near Eastern religion was very much sex-based. It was about enticing the gods to sex with each other, enticing them to sex with mortals, to bring about more Nephilim, because these were the heroes of old, the warriors of renown that people idolized, and they wanted them to be their warriors for their kingdoms. But in contrast, you have God calling Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob. Jacob has this vision at Bethel where he sees the stairway into heaven on which the angels of God were ascending and descending. He had a vision of what the people at Babel were trying to bring about, but his was a holy, godly, redeemed version. They wanted these lesser gods. He was having this vision of the true God, this go between heaven and earth. And that's what Jesus referenced in John's gospel when Philip was under the fig tree, and then he was introduced to Jesus, and he said, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Jesus said, "You know, I saw you when you were under the fig tree," where he was meditating, and then he said, "You know, you know, you're the Messiah." And he said, "Are you amazed because I said I saw you under the fig tree? I tell you the truth, you will see the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man," basically saying, I am that vision that Jacob had at Bethel of the angels of God ascending and descending, which was a kind of a proto in concept. It was a prototype for the temple. That we talked about that from Exodus, and then from Solomon's temple, and then Ezekiel. This whole idea of the divine nature coming into human nature to kind of reinstate this state of Eden. That's how the kingdom of God comes into the world. It's not us dying and going to heaven. It's heaven comes into the world through us, and we advance God's kingdom by advancing the faith, by advancing the church, by teaching people the gospel, teaching them why it's true that Jesus rose from the dead, because faith is the precondition of regeneration, of the indwelling of the Spirit of God, of becoming that temple of God. That's what's in view in John 14, and that's what true Christianity is.
I like it.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
convinced.
I mean, thank you. Like, I came up with it, but
normally you spin
normally
a
we
good
argue.
you spun a good yarn.
Normally we argue, so I'm always kind of relieved when we don't.
Well, that's why I let
don't argue.
you off the hook. But plus, I mean, in all seriousness, this John 14 stuff was actually new to me. So that was
Y'all don't read my blog, do
it
you?
was
You have a blog?
I have a blog. Did you guys
Oh.
hear about it?
Oh, I start reading that.
Yeah, it's
I have enough rabbit holes that I'm falling in these days.
it's thethirdhelix.com. Link in the description. But yeah. So were there other passages that we need to talk about for dying and
I
going
think
to heaven?
those were my big ones. Dre, I don't know if you had any other ones. But
Hebrews 12.
but off your last thing, I just had to throw out that, and she's buying a stairway to heaven.
Dude,
I couldn't get the song out of my head when you said that.
I wanted to talk about this when we were talking about Satanism last week. That's one where if you test it, if you play it backwards, it does seem to say "my sweet Satan."
First of all, who the fuck says that? Who says "my sweet Satan"? That's
Well,
how I know this whole thing's a farce. Like,
Okay, but
it's hidden. If you play it backwards, it says "my sweet Satan." The fuck out of here! Like, I don't,
but if you listen to the lyrics of the song,
right?
and this is the irony, like you hear about New Ageism, like the New Age movement, which is really just a renaming of occultism.
It's neo-cultism.
Yeah.
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 See what I did there?
I see it. Yeah.
You're very good.
I see what you did. Yeah. So New Ageism, it's about like the whole, like the thrust of occultism is bringing about this New Age, which is what Aleister Crowley was about.
This
what
is the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
This is an outgrowth of this underground version of Christianity it wasn't a controlled tradition. It kind of got weird with John Dee and angel magic going into sex magic, but the idea of it was to bring about this new age in which creation is restored. And you have kind of the same idea in modern political progressivism, this utopian ideal where we achieve this age of perfect equality and justice and free healthcare for everybody, but it's like a godless utopia. But these are all basically Christian heresies that have grown up in the absence of true Christianity. True Christianity is about the church is here to bring about the Messianic age.
I almost feel like one could argue that You know, we've talked about the telephone game, and something can start off being true and then it gets twisted and turned. You could almost argue that these people that are doing this new age quasi Satanism are actually just doing a slightly deviated version of Christianity. They just missed a couple of key parts.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's exactly what he's saying, man.
But
Yeah. I just have to say it in different, less words than Brian.
well,
Oh, I
Like
see.
that's what I do.
no, I'm glad that you're listening to what I'm saying and kind of putting it into your own words. But it's
But-
but
No,
wouldn't
I said the
say
same
it-
thing, but I said it like this.
But
But
the
it's-
difference
But it's a
is
it's a
that
perverted version of it. I want to
Right,
say.
it's perverted, but my point
perverted
is
in the way that
it makes
you make yourself God.
peace.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not suggesting that it's good or holy.
Right.
What I'm suggesting is I wonder if the people that actually started it were intending to be perverse. But like after a couple of translations, that it was like, hey, you know what we can do? We can be in
Well,
charge and do our own thing. It's like, that
I
wasn't
really
what they were
think that
trying
true
to do.
Satanism is the worship of yourself.
C.S. Lewis said that
Agreed.
So
the
therefore, if you can,
devil is forever God's ape.
God's what?
God's ape.
Ape.
Like he apes what God does. And you see that in the Garden of Eden. Like what the devil offered Adam and Eve was essentially what God wanted them to have.
They could have had it. They'd come to it honestly versus
Right.
cheating.
Like, and that's really true of every temptation. Every temptation to sin is essentially an offer for something God really does want you to have, but he wants you to have it at its best. He wants you to have it on
Or-
the right terms.
I think that's half of it. But I think the point that Dre made is also super valid, right? And I think that's the argument you would make about Gnosticism is that the idea of making yourself the conduit versus Christ being the conduit, right? Becoming so wrapped up in self and ego that you think you can be the one to do it, and you don't need
God.
Christ, right?
eat this and you will know what God
Right.
knows.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
It's
you
like
know.
that joke where the new chemists were doing AI and they looked at God and they were like, "Hey, look what we just made. He's sentient. He's, you know, he has a soul. He's a person. He has full intelligence." And God's like, "How'd you do that?" And he's like, "Well, we started with this silica that we took out of the dirt and then we made the chip and blah blah blah." And God goes, "Cool. Do it again, but start with your own dirt."
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
the joke's subtly different. It's
Yeah.
a better joke. Like I wanted to jump to the punchline, but the point was going to the whole point of starting from nothing versus starting halfway down the road is not nearly the same.
Well, that's the Gnostic myth, right? So the evil child god makes all these things, and he makes these beings out of clay, but
Mhm.
they didn't have the breath of life,
Right.
as they would say in Polynesia,
Mhm.
the Ha. So Sophia, the great goddess, she felt bad for her son, and she breathed life into Adam and Eve,
Mhm.
and that's why he thinks he's good, but he didn't even, like, his mommy hooked him up behind his back, like, okay, now they have life, and then he's like this angry god. You worship me and not my mom. Like that Star Trek episode, I would have won. I would have. Like, whoa.
What Star Trek episode?
The old one with the
on
kid
the-
that was like playing games with them,
Mhm.
and Kirk finally figured it out, and like,
He
oh,
was
he's a
controlling
child.
them and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I
like
remember that one.
he's a child. He's just a super powerful child. And we
Yeah.
gotta
Those shows are great.
very much so. I
I'm
mean,
a
Q is part of
huge-
that too. In the Next Generation, it's kind of
Mhm.
it's an offshoot of,
Yeah.
of that same.
Yeah.
So I have one serious closing thought and one joke.
I did have a serious point I wanted to add, but it escapes me right now.
All right, so let me make mine real quick. Something
Okay.
you said a long time ago, and I jotted this down. So you were talking about Nua, the spirit. You were trying to differentiate spirit from soul.
Numa.
Sorry. I didn't take good note. So Numa, and it means breath, whisper. You said I didn't look it up in Strong's, but
Breath or wind.
wind. Okay. It seems to me that there's an argument to be made. I'm doing a reversion to a previous discussion. If spirit is breath and breathing is speaking, right?
Okay.
Then there's a potentially weird conflation there with logos,
Absolutely.
right? because
It's not weird at all. That's
No,
that's
no,
a
but
direct line.
but I'm saying that makes it odd because it almost blends the Holy Spirit with Jesus, right? Because if Jesus was the Word and the Word was God, but the Holy Spirit is the holy pneuma, like where's
Right.
there?
The-
And I'm not trying to rehash a fight.
Right.
Believe me, I'm just pointing out there's a weird little like, and then you mentioned a
Are
verse
you
earlier.
are you asking where the distinction is?
No, I'm not asking. I'm just pointing out that there's a really heavy line. There's a really
Would you
heavy
like to-
overlap.
Would you like to know?
Hang on. I got one more thought. So you said
Okay.
something else, another verse, and you were talking about. And I didn't get it written down. It's when we were talking about John, but you jumped somewhere else, and you said that you quoted Jesus as saying something to the effect of, "I will be with you in. God will be with you. I will be with you in the Spirit," or something like that.
Yeah, that's the rest of chapter 14.
That was as in chapter 14. Okay. But it just those two things kind of that was what spun that into my head because I wrote down the pneuma and then you said that and I was like, wait, breath, logos. It seems like the Spirit's getting wrapped up in the same conversational point. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. And then my joke that I'm going to throw out before you explain this one is the Watchers should have got Moses to intercede on their behalf instead of Enoch because he was apparently much better at reconvincing God to change his mind.
I mean, God was already going to change his mind. The Calvinists said so. I knew you'd ask that, Moses.
We're going to tackle that in a future episode for the listeners at home. Well, the Spirit, the pneuma, is like more the animating principle, whereas the logos is more of the executive, like explicit communication. That makes sense.
The pneuma is the sound, but the logos is the language that conveys.
Well, I wouldn't say the sound.
It's the packet that rides on the wave.
You got to modulate it into the carrier
Right.
wave.
Actually, I wasn't thinking that, but that's I'm thinking through whether that's a good illustration or if it's a heresy. But
it's such a
I
fine
mean,
line
Andre
on
said
this
it
show.
must be a heresy. So
it's like I said, it's a fine line in our show. What are you going to do?
It's well, and I try to make it a straight line, a thick black line so you can tell. Yeah, the question, like, is it the medium or is it the message?
Yeah,
the logos is the message.
Yeah, no, actually, that's so from a Greek point of view, that's actually what it says. So Greek logos means the statement, the embodiment, the speech. Whereas
so I was being funny, but I actually
you were dead on.
Yeah,
you were dead on balls accurate.
Balls accurate. Right.
It's weird when you guys aren't arguing with me. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to.
Brian's like looking for the fight. He's like,
So,
he's like major pain. We're hugging him, and he's like, triangle boy.
Sir, somebody must need some killing. No, Major, you killed them all.
No, I dig that though. Like if that's the difference between the two, right? The pneuma is the carrier wave, and the logos is the encrypted message. I dig it.
To put it into Marine SIGINT talk.
And then it has to travel through the heavens.
Did we give any secrets away just now?
Nope.
It's
That's just radio
Com
propagation
101,
theory.
man.
I don't know what's classified anymore. It's been like 30 years since I knew it was classified.
That's how you just put information into something that can go far away.
Just good old multiplexing.
Yeah. Thanks,
modulation. Yeah.
So all right.
I think that's a wrap, boys.
Normally I would feel
Think so?
like there's so much more to say, but I have a blog about this, so it's all there. It's all there. Read it, learn it, love it.
Dre, you got more? Are you not satisfied?
No, I mean I agree. I just
you're also surprised that we hit such a heady topic and we're already done.
As I looked things about just heaven and different cultures and where it comes from and how how people interpret it. I fell down an NDE rabbit hole.
Okay.
And I'm really mad that I didn't discover this stuff way back when we talked about near death
NDEs
experiences.
properly. We did
Right,
a whole
yeah.
show titled NDE.
Yeah, man. So I came across this doctor, this neuroscientist named Ebel Alexander. And he had a rare meningitis disease in his brain. And he fell into a coma, and then he describes the world that he saw, complete with what he described as kind of like a worm beginning where there was really not much, but then followed an orb of light, and it took him into this lush valley with tons of happy people, and to include a woman that greeted him there, which he later describes as his guardian angel. But what made the story compelling to me was that his brain was turned off during his coma. So all 8 lobes of his brain were completely dormant. They were turned off. He's fucking brain dead. And it shows this all in scans. There's no energy going through his brain, but he has these memories anyway.
He wasn't mostly dead. He was dead.
Well, brain dead anyway.
Right.
His heart was still pumping and whatnot.
Hey,
So,
Dre,
huh?
I hate to do this.
What do you-
Never mind. Go ahead. I'll do
No,
it.
what do you hate to do?
There's only 6 lobes of the brain, and it
Okay.
just
Is there only
calls you-
6? Maybe
Yeah.
I got it wrong, but he's a neuroscientist. And
calls
if he
your-
said 8,
He probably
call-
got it right.
It calls his whole story into question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Surely
I just-
the neuroscientist didn't get it wrong.
I shouldn't have brought it up. I
they're,
just.
they're, I mean,
You said 8 lobes, and I'm like, is that right? And I looked it up. It doesn't matter. Go ahead. I don't care. I'm a jerk.
regardless,
I'm a jerk.
I mean,
I know that we just.
so basically his as he starts studying the brain again, as he wakes up, and things are turned back on, and he had no idea, the people standing in front of him, they didn't know who the doctor was until all that stuff started coming back.
They were like,
And
"Yo,
the-
you were dead."
Right. In fact, he had a 2% chance of living, and then they stopped all the antibiotics because they're like, hey, he's not coming out of this. So his wife essentially is like, okay, stop the antibiotics,
plug.
pull the
Yeah.
plug, we're fucking done. And then dude wakes up, he's like, what's up?
Well, don't make her sound like casual about it. Like
Well, I mean,
she's just.
She might have been.
She's
yeah.
probably.
She's like, I can't wait to cash
She's
in
the
this
wife
dude's
of a.
money.
She's the wife of a surgeon. They probably had the conversation ahead of time. He
Yeah,
probably
like-
had an advance directive.
Yeah, Matt was
Right.
way more gracious than I was just now. But so it's kind of like
My middle name.
the way he was describing the brain and your consciousness was like your brain doesn't store your memories, not your long-term ones. It's more of a conduit of how to access them and translate them in your head. It's
They're in
almost
the
like
cloud.
you have
They're in the
RAM,
cl- They're in
have
the
RAM.
cloud.
right? And there's a cloud.
Mm-hmm. And the
Yeah.
cloud is
Like-
your DNA, right? Isn't that kind of how that
but
part of that?
but it's beyond. It's the spirit world. It's the
Oh, okay, got it.
the
got
world
it.
of
He's going with it's
your
metaphysical,
disembodied
like
spirit,
you-
for lack of a better
you're-
term.
Okay.
So,
So
you're
and he's a neuroscientist.
yes,
Okay.
it's pretty cool. So I bought a few books from him just to see what that's all about, and we'll be bringing this up later on.
You buy a lot
So,
of books.
yeah, I do.
I buy a lot of books. I read a lot fewer books.
I think that's a thing. I mean, I just
That,
got a new
that's
book.
that's me
Like,
too. Yes.
My wife is dope, right? Like she goes to the store. She was at Sam's Club, of all
Yep.
places, and she texted me. She was like, "Do you have The Art of War?" And I said, "No." I was like, "Yeah, grab that for me." So now I have a hard copy of The Art of War.
Right,
Like,
right on.
Have you read that before?
I've read it. I've like skimmed it. I haven't like consumed it.
It's
But
awesome. I love
This is
that
The
book.
Art of War and a handful of other books. The Tao Te Ching, the Confucian Analects, the
Tao
Great
Te
So
Ching.
Learning,
Dao Ching? That,
the
that,
Doctrine of the Mean, and the works of
right.
Mencius.
You got to read The Art of War, Miyamoto Musashi's The Book of Five
I have
Rings,
the 5 rings. I've got it
And-
on my bookshelf.
and Yagyu Munenori's The Life-Giving Sword.
I've never heard of that one, but I have the
It's-
5 rings.
It's
The 5
typically
rings, I dug the 5 rings.
it's
a lot.
typically packaged with Miyamoto Musashi. Like it usually comes in one volume. I value Yagyu Munenori more than Miyamoto Musashi. I'll probably get beat up for that if I meet.
I think it's a temperament issue, right? Musashi is he's kind of a bastard, right?
He's
Like
kind of a,
like
he's a
right. No,
bit-
I'm saying like the style's not for everybody, right? Because some people read that and they're like, you got to be a horrible person to think this way. And I read it and I'm like, I love this. This is a great book.
well, Sun Tzu's the same way.
Well, so I've been
Like-
reading this.
Well, Yagi Munenori, the life-giving sword versus
Have
the.
Have y'all heard of this book? The
I haven't
48
heard of that.
Powers? The
Well-
48 Laws of Power?
I'm about to drop something biblical though. It's kind of off topic, but we've veered
Well,
off
so
a
hang on.
while
So
ago.
Dre, so before we go fully off topic and we take the show into
We
like
are
an
fully off
unrecoverable
topic.
place. No, Dre mentioned this NDE thing. So like I mentioned it casually during our NDE
We should
show.
return to Yagi Munenori though in a later episode.
Let's
Sure.
let's do that.
It's biblical, but
We
yeah.
can do all the Eastern books and wrap them all together. But like I mentioned casually on our NDE episode, I didn't give it much airtime because we were moving along quickly, and that was also like episode 3 or something like that, and we didn't really. We not that we're great at it now, but we were terrible at controlling a show and like moving it along and keeping it.
we haven't really improved.
We've
Not
improved a lot. Whether we've what the end state looks like, who knows, right? But so specifically, my dad has had an NDE, right? So
Yeah.
right. He had a widowmaker heart attack when he was 39, 40, something like that. Like I was a senior in high school, and my dad flatlined and died. And he had absolute, a near-death experience. And we haven't had a lot of conversation about, like, I haven't quizzed him on the specifics of what he experienced, but it was very much a vision, an experience of heaven, that kind of thing. In fact, I was just at my dad's house a couple of days ago, and we were talking about the show. He's a big fan, as you can imagine, right? Probably, I'm sure Dre, he probably rivals your mom as our 2 biggest fans, right?
Thanks
Sure.
for listening, Mike.
Absolutely. But he in one hand, he's, thinks our show's great and thinks it's really neat that, we're doing this. But then, we're talking about some of the different topics, and he was like, well, I disagree with you on the heaven thing, right? And I said, I know you do, and I respect that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're wrong. I'm just telling you, what I read now, I read it. But a big part of his understanding or his belief has to do with that NDE that he experienced, right?
Right.
And I think it's interesting. I'm of the opinion, and I think I had mentioned this during our other episode, that what I understand of an NDE is a combination of possible visions, like you had said, Dre, about, people always have the visions of heaven, but not of like family members. It's not familial. It's not people they know. It's not Bobby and Tommy and Jimmy and Lisa. It's Jesus and and God and that
Right.
kind of a thing, which would, be one thing. But I think there has to be a certain amount of NDEs that are attributed to the brain's consciousness going through
And that's
some
why
type-
this
some-
one fascinated me,
some type of
because-
a death experience, right?
because this time this dude's brain was off, and they have scans of the time
right.
of when.
So the point is how could
So
I have
the
been
point
having
is-
brain activity when the brain was having no activity?
Right.
Well,
so
okay.
his consciousness. So what he posits, the consciousness is not in your brain.
Oh,
The
I see.
consciousness is somewhere outside of
So
your brain,
while
and your
while
brain just is the conduit to
we
your
can
brain
measure some
fil-
of it,
I-
we're only measuring
I
part
got a
of
lot
it.
to
We're not
say about
measuring
that.
your
all
brain
of it.
filters all of that out
I
while
got a
you're
lot to-
conscious. I know you do, Brian. So, but also,
I
what's-
just want to put my pin in that
what's
so
what's
we can.
interesting about a lot of these NDEs is that most of them are atheists, and I think all the ones you go down the rabbit hole on YouTube.
I think it's the
and-
atheist ones that get more pub because
Yeah, yeah.
it's more credible, I think is the
Well,
logic,
it-
because it would
well,
make
because
sense
their
that
story is super compelling. They're like, holy shit, I was wrong.
right. Whereas a Christian's like, of course I saw Jesus. That's who else was I going to see when I died?
I think my favorite ones though are the ones that visit hell. Their NDE is hell.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, you want to straighten up, this is where you're gonna be, right here. This is what's happening. And I think the one I saw the other night
Scared
is
straight
this-
at a spiritual level.
is this weird dude. He did a bunch of drugs and stuff, but then and like it was too long. It was like an hour. I'm like, I don't care about your experience, but he's like, you'll never believe who he saw. Wait till the end. I'm like, damn it. So I'm fast forwarding. I'm like, who did he see? Who did he see? And this dude, he lives in Idaho, right? So
He saw a
What-
dude from Idaho.
no, he saw a dude from Palmyra, New York. He didn't know
Oh,
who he was.
he's from Idaho.
He's from Idaho. So
Okay.
this is
I'm sorry. I thought that was
he-
the big punchline.
he saw Jay Smitty, Joseph Smith
In hell.
in hell. That's right. so he, so it's funny. He comes
okay,
back and like
I'm convinced.
and
I'm
this, and this,
convinced.
and this pastor's like, or this dude he was telling the experience to, he's like, wait, what house? Describe the house again. And then he shows like pictures, and he's like, describe the guy. What did he look like? This is who this? He's like, yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy I saw. And he's like, do you know who that is? He's like, I have no idea who that is.
He was
He's
not
like,
happy. He was straight up not having a good
he was
time.
not- I don't know, but that dude was.
Did
a
he live
warning.
next door to Muhammad?
That dude was a warning to me, and he was surprised, like, because I didn't see like Buddha or Jesus or like I saw this guy. I guess his name was Joseph Smith or something like that. I don't know, but and I was like, you got to be shitting me, and I just turned it off. I was like, what? Come on, man. You're from Idaho and you hate Mormons? Got it.
So you don't buy it? Is what you're saying?
I totally buy it. I buy it all now. I'm in with the NDEs.
All right. I mean, I had a lot to say before you told me Joseph Smith was in hell, and now like
A dude died.
Why
in
fight
go-
it, right? Take the win.
I mean, I have to change my whole worldview now, but
I'm here for you. I am here for you.
yeah.
So I said in the outset that Brian was going to tell you whether or not you're going to heaven, and he did. The answer is no, you're not. You're not going to heaven. Look at me.
But it's better news than that.
Right.
So
It's a good thing.
Yeah,
Right.
heaven is coming for you.
that's right.
You just gotta.
That sounds like a threat.
Actually, it is.
Boogaloo.
It actually. We don't script this stuff. That's exactly how I meant it for some people.
Right.
The problem of evil is we've talked about that before. If God is all loving and all powerful, then why is there evil? If he's all loving, then he wants to get rid of all evil, but he can't. Or
that means get rid of us. So,
let me finish, man.
oh, sorry.
You talked for like 2 hours just now. But,
Stop it. Stop. You do not continue down this path.
I'm gonna
We
start
can go
putting,
there.
I'm gonna start putting time lapse counters at the end of
Alright.
every episode.
No, I value what you have to say. Right.
Not the point.
Just not as much as what I have to say. That's all.
There it is. There it is.
Okay. So
In
If-
vino veritas.
if I've had like 2 drinks,
And the truth comes out.
but
It doesn't take much to get the truth out of
in
you.
sobriety veritas from this guy. So if God is all loving, we know the problem of evil. Since there's evil, God is either not all loving or not all powerful, therefore not God. But you're the evil, he's going to eliminate. When he eliminates evil, when heaven comes here, either you're with him and you get to be a part of it, or you're not, and you get what you saw all of your life, which is exclusion from God's presence. So
What you gonna do when the largest arms in the world and Hulkamania run wild on you?
I got to respond to what you just said, actually, though, Brian. So
okay,
the problem of evil, what you just summarized as the problem of evil, I reject. And I need to make that really freaking clear. That is a logical fallacy of the whole either or thing. That is not the only 2 options. That's the only 2 options that people came up with to try to create the problem of evil, and the problem of evil doesn't exist. So I reject the logic problem of either or with that. And we can do this on another show, because
We could do that
I'm
in
not getting
person.
into it. I'm not getting into it now at this point on this
wait,
show.
I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm going to know why I'm wrong.
Well, they got to tune in next week.
Yeah.
So
it's too much to get into. I'm being serious. I don't want to get
Right.
into it because
All
we're
right.
gonna. It'll be 2 more hours of us going over this. But
Okay.
like
well,
I reject the either or concept there.
okay. Well, I win by default until then. You know that,
That's
right?
fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Walk
So-
around with your fake belt.
So,
All right. I'll claim it
we'll,
for real.
we'll unify it later.
I don't.
to
You
be
might
the
be
man,
right. I don't.
you gotta
I don't
beat
know
the
what.
man.
I don't know
Woo!
what you're talking about. So you might be right. I don't.
I am right, 100%.
All right. So for comic
So you're
nerds,
not going to heaven. Look at me.
nobody.
not going.
Yeah. So for comic nerds, I didn't plan this. I just put on this shirt and realized after the fact, this is the Kingdom Come version of Superman. And we talked about what Kingdom Come means in the Lord's Prayer today. And so, maybe my just utter dorkery will help you.
Maybe that's why I brought up 1978 missiles hitting the San Andreas, starring Christopher Reeve and Gene
It
Hackman.
worked out. It worked out
Argo
pretty
Kidder.
well. It was all these undesigned coincidences, which is
Yeah.
another concept worth discussing in a
My
later
favorite
podcast.
fictional character is Superman.
John Calvin would appreciate the way this show ended.
Though my very favorite film character passed away this week. And
You said that earlier, dude. I wanted to get in. I wanted to dig into that, but I didn't.
That's worth expanding upon.
Yeah, like
Sure.
I think it's cool. Not cool that he's dead. It's
So-
cool that,
Right.
that you identified
So-
him as your favorite.
he's my
actor.
guy throughout
There,
the ages of my life. That's the guy that's kind of
there are three
pushed me
things-
to almost be who I am. But that's the fictional character that I want to be.
There are three things that Dre and I have bonded over the years. Our mutual love for Michael Jackson, our mutual love for Superman, and our mutual love for Apollo Creed.
The
I mean,
Rocky
the-
franchise for sure.
I know the
there's-
Rocky franchise is
Yeah,
what he
right.
really
There's
did,
there's probably more than that, but
Right. Yeah,
like-
those are big ones, man. Like even when I played like as little kids and my little white cousins and whatnot, I was always Apollo Creed, and I didn't mind losing all the time because I was Apollo Creed.
well, I grew up on Rocky. I would say I would say Sylvester Stallone taught me to be a man from watching Rocky.
I love Sly, but
And when I met Dre, I felt like Rocky Balboa meeting Apollo Creed, and this man was going to be a friend for life, because he just kind of channeled him in a way that like Apollo Creed and Rocky just sort of like, we fought, but we loved each other. And
I love that
Matt
he's on
has-
the winning end of this. But that's okay.
well, I mean, you want
But
a
if there's
rematch?
not some
You wanna-
damn
you
war to
want a
fight,
rematch?
then the
You want-
warrior might as well be dead, right?
You want a rematch, man? Is that? I mean, if you're
One
gonna-
second. One
look,
second is very
it-
hard of my intelligence to handle.
If you're gonna train me to take down Clubber Lang, it's the worst. It's the least I can do for you, man.
Apollo did win that fight, by the way. It's confirmed in
Well,
Creed.
Of course, it's
He said,
confirmed.
"Who won?" He's like, "He did," because
Of
he's the
course, he's
greatest.
gonna say that because he's dead.
Rocky
think he's
wouldn't
gonna
lie.
win. He
Rocky
gave
doesn't
the
lie.
win.
Do you think he's gonna
post-mortem.
tell his kid like, "Yeah, I whooped your dad's ass"?
Exactly. I
Yeah, he
whooped your
did.
dead dad's ass, and ain't nothing
Also-
anybody can say about it.
Also, Rocky 4, he's like, "What happened to your eye?" He's like, "Same friend," because his friend beat his ass. That's what it's okay.
I'll tell you what, Dre.
It's,
Look.
I'll tell you what.
Look,
But yeah, that was a tough one for me in Hollywood. That's a big one.
I'm gonna tell you this, man.
R.I.P. Carl Weathers. You're my guy.
Yeah, right.
I'm gonna tell you.
Former Raider linebacker.
I'll take that fight anytime. But
Okay, I mean,
I'm pretty sure you whip my ass.
I mean,
But I
Yeah.
know you wouldn't kill me, so I would take it. So
I wouldn't mind doing a Rocky movie review because that's but
yeah. But yeah, so Carl Weathers died, and
Yeah.
Dre and I are
fuck.
broken up about it, and we're
Sucks.
we're reminiscing about our past bonding experiences while we talk about punching each other. And,
we ran on the beach and we jumped in the water and hugged each other.
And you wore little
It-
short
it-
shorts.
Yeah, and cropped.
It was
some midriff shirts.
like to somebody who
why-
didn't know any better, it would look
The 80s
super
are
gay.
gay.
To anybody who didn't know any better, it would look super gay. But Dre and I know better, and it wasn't. So
Right,
shut up.
it wasn't gay.
Yeah.
So he admitted to his wife that he was afraid, you know. It's-
All
but
right.
yeah.
Hey, Black Bull.
But hey, you're not going to heaven. It's better. Sorry for the bad news, but it's actually good news. And we have anything else? You guys good?
The best
Okay.
Carl Weathers movie was him in Toy Story 4.
Seeing that?
I've never seen Toy Story 4,
I
but
was just looking for the most obscure Carl Weathers credit.
Adam
I mean-
Sandler, the Happy Gilmore, he was in that.
Yeah,
I'm a big
He
fan
was
of Action
in a lot of
Jackson.
stuff. Action Jackson was great. Yep.
The Great
Predator.
Vanity. The late Great Vanity was in that movie. Craig T. Nelson, Coach, was the bad guy. That's kind of weird. So
I feel like Predator is the only second to his Rocky.
he
Role.
was in the TV version of In the Heat of the Night. And that was Mr. Tibbs was pretty good. And he had another TV show that was like that. But now my guy, he dies and now I can't think of his shows because
Right, but my point is Rocky is why everybody knows him. But if it wasn't
his
for
commercial, he
Predator,
was
but if it
Dylan.
wasn't for Predator, you wouldn't have
Yeah.
the muscly arm black dude, white dude gripping because that was Predator.
and he was pushing too many pencils. That's why
Clearly.
he
Clearly, because my man was always yoked.
Oh, hold on a second, guys. Okay, so this podcast came about because a certain listener by the name of Corey asked for it. She wanted us to talk about, the going to heaven subject. Before we started, I wrote her and said, hey, we're going to do this. Do you have any specific questions? And she finally just now answered me. So Corey, this podcast didn't go the way you wanted. It's because you waited so long to write to me. So there you go.
What were her
So-
questions?
So I
Did
asked.
we get to him?
Well, I asked, but hold on. This is going to be really surreal for Corey because she's getting all this and it's happening in real time for me.
Near real time, yeah.
Yeah. So any particular questions, topics you want us to cover along those lines? She didn't answer. Then she wrote, dang, sorry, I've been traveling, blah, 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 blah. And then she answered, insert every Bible verse that one might read and think it implies believers go to heaven upon death. There.
We kind of
So-
did that.
we kind of did that.
Yeah.
We got you, Corey. We got you, dog.
Hey, you know what, Corey?
That's what we
keep
do.
As I keep telling you when we talk about this stuff over Messenger and social media and stuff, it's in my blog. Got a blog.
And the show actually has a Facebook Messenger that I might check this week. So feel free to hit that up. And we all have our DMs open in the spots that you see on the screen.
Yeah. So I feel like normally we end these things with me feeling like there's so much ground left uncovered. But on this one, I wrote a blog about it. So
Right. So
there's questions
it's
you have.
uber covered. If you wrote a blog, it's so covered
I didn't cover the Neo Kano stuff in the blog.
because you have a new blog to write.
Well, I've been meaning, like, yeah. Well, I think I kind of covered it here, but anything else you can think of in the blog. Link in the description.
So with that, I will say, stay curious, stay enlightened, and we will see you next week. God bless.
Show.